Hello and welcome. Coming up tonight, is the battle for control of Greenland over? Britain's former top spy Alex Younger knows, if anyone does. Will Starmer finally get tough with the American president? I'll ask the Energy Secretary, Ed Miliband. Pippa and Screeny will tell us whether Trump is a phase or forever.
The president might have backed down over tariffs, but has the US's reputation been tarnished for good?
And after Trump insisted that, God, he's very proud of the job he's doing, I'll ask the former Tory Foreign Secretary James Cleverly and your party's Jeremy Corbyn if they're able to verify that. Watcher, Keir Starmer would have said his greatest policy success so far has been to form a more constructive relationship with Trump than most other Western leaders, have achieved. The fruits include lower tariffs than Trump imposed on the rest of the world, but trying to be friends with the capricious American president is, to use a resonant phrase of the Democrat governor of California, Gavin Newsom, like trying to be friends with a T-Rex. And as we watched with trepidation as Donald Trump violated the sovereignty of a NATO member, Denmark, by bullying it to surrender Greenland, the UK looked very much like a raptor's lunch, because when Starmer urged Trump not to take Greenland without Denmark's permission, Trump replied with a 10% tariff on what Britain and other countries sell to America and ridiculed Starmer as stupid for giving up ownership of Chagos. Tonight, Trump said that, after all, he wouldn't impose those new tariffs because, he said, NATO's Secretary-General Rutte had come up with a framework for a Greenland and Arctic deal that would be great, that was his words, for the US. So the question tonight for Starmer is, having been bitten by Trump, does he accept that the American T-Rex will devour us as soon as protect us, depending on his mood? It's a painful reality that UK security is dangerously dependent on American technology, intelligence and goodwill. And if Trump were to withdraw that goodwill, our nuclear deterrent would be hobbled, as just one terrifying example. So, surely it's time to emulate Canada's Mark Carney by working tirelessly and rapidly to form deeper alliances with other nations that share our values. We would be less vulnerable to Trump's whims if we were part of what I called a year ago a coalition of the liberal, humane nations. Now, it's not too late, although Britain is more vulnerable for wasting a year. Pippa.
Well, since the start of the year, Donald Trump has marched his international allies up and down the hill over Greenland. Much of this has played out on Truth Social. This striking image is of him in the Oval Office with European leaders and a map with Canada and Greenland covered in the US flag. AI generated, of course. This didn't actually happen. But has Trump already alienated the Western world? The European Council for Foreign Relations polled countries asking if they saw the US as an ally. India was the only one which said the relationship had got stronger over the last year, while all of the others felt it had got worse since Trump was back in the White House. Across the EU, just 16% of people now see the US as an ally, down from 21%. But the biggest shift is the UK, where 1 in 4 think that the US shares our interests and values, down from 37%. Now, that's a huge 12% fall. But some people don't think this rupture in relations is permanent. This YouGov polling shows that 50% of Brits think that the US's policy towards Europe will return to normal after Trump leaves the White House, with just 25% saying it won't. Keir Starmer has always taken a softly approach to Trump, but today he slightly hardened his rhetoric by telling MPs he will not yield. Number 10 tells me that this is a deliberate strategy and he'll go further if he needs to. We asked YouGov to poll people on his handling of the situation, and half said he was doing badly. Just over a quarter said he's doing quite well, but quite a big chunk are still undecided. Perhaps his tougher stance will win over a few more. Now, Keir Starmer is taking a very careful approach with Trump, and he thinks being calm and pragmatic is going to pay off. There was a hint at Prime Minister's questions today that he might be getting a little bit tougher with him. James, do you think he's getting it right?
Well, when you're dealing with any international situation and when you're dealing with a personality like President Trump, who is unpredictable, and President Trump makes a virtue of his unpredictability, you have to know what you believe and stay anchored to what you believe. And so if President Trump says something that aligns with British national interest, then you support it. And if he says something which is at odds with British national interest, then you can criticise it, perhaps privately, perhaps publicly. I think the challenge with Starmer is that he's really only now starting to find his feet, which is why I think there is so much uncertainty. Now, our position has been clear so for example, on Chagos, we think that's the wrong move by the government, and we support President Trump's criticism of that error. With regard to Greenland, we shouldn't be in a situation when allies are threatening each other.
Yeah, we'll come back to those. Jeremy, what do you think? Is Starmer handling it well?
Not really, no. He's been flattering Trump ever since he went into office, and it hasn't done him any good at all. And Trump is powerful because he's unpredictable, and the unpredictability is his power. And he knows that. And that's why some of it, I believe, is a performative act. And so he sets the whole of Europe in a right old tiz this week by announcing tariffs. 3 days later, the tariffs are all gone. We've been here before.
But he's a bit tougher today, wasn't he, at PMQs?
Yes, and he got slightly tougher today because he's been backed into a corner on it, because clearly the flattery hasn't worked. And whilst he might think he can win Trump over with maybe another state visit, why not? Let's have some more of that. And so I think it's time to recognise that what is serious about Trump is the national strategic strategy announced last November, which is, I think, very dangerous for the whole world. And essentially, it says the US will go where the US wishes to go to get the natural resources the US wants.
Now, James, you mentioned Chagos. The government says Trump was lashing out on the Chagos deal to put pressure on us over Greenland. There's some truth in that, isn't there? Isn't it a bit opportunistic of the Conservative Party to leap on it?
No, because our position has been consistent. If we had changed our position because President Trump had changed his position, that might have been a legitimate criticism. But our criticism of government action has been absolutely consistent. It's the Labour Party that was saying initially, oh, this is a brilliant idea because the Americans like it. Then suddenly President Trump said he doesn't like it. And David Lammy was the one that said, oh, if the Americans don't like it, we won't do the deal. So it's Labour that are tied up in knots because of the president's unpredictability. Kemi, Priti Patel, I and the rest of the Conservatives have been absolutely consistent. This is a duff deal that the government didn't need to do, shouldn't have done, and we're the ones that have been consistent on this.
Well, you were talking about the Chagosians today, which is the first time I've heard the party do that. But you were Foreign Secretary when these negotiations opened. Aren't you even slightly responsible for where we are?
No, because there was not a deal that was in the UK's national interest. So we did not do the deal. And this is a fundamental error that the Labour Party have got. They think the aim is to do a deal. The aim is to do a good deal. And if the deal doesn't work for the British people, you don't do it, which is why we didn't do a deal.
Maybe the issue is it's a colonial situation where Britain in 1965 deliberately split the Chagos Islands and Diego Garcia from Mauritius, even though they were administered as one colony at the time. Private deal done by Wilson and Ramgoolam at the time. And since then, the Chagos Islands has been disgustingly and disgracefully treated. Eventually, Britain accepted the disgusting treatment of them and offered compensation. And eventually, I'm chair of the Chagos All-Party Group, agreed to the right of return. It was only latterly Conservative Party and Reform decided this was giving up a colony we should hang on to, and have turned it into a sort of empire loyalist thing at the moment. Trump, a week ago, was saying he agreed with the agreement the government had reached with Mauritius. Yesterday, he said he didn't.
OK, James and Jeremy, thanks very much. Robert, back to you.
Yeah, thanks so much. So we're going to return now to the extraordinary wrangle over control of Greenland. I'm delighted to be joined by the former head of MI6, the Secret Intelligence Service, Sir Alex Younger. Alex, lovely to see you. You, unlike Donald Trump at Davos, will recognise that what I've got here is a map of Greenland. He called it Iceland. I don't know if you noticed that. I mean, it looks as though within minutes of saying he wasn't going to back down, he has now backed down and says there's a sort of joint NATO agreement for managing the security of Greenland. But I wanted to ask you, why is the sort of military presence in this part of the world so seemingly vital to America and indeed to NATO as a whole?
Well, that speech was pretty telling. There was a sentence in there which was, why would you defend something if you don't own it? Which utterly undermines the concept of an alliance, and I thought was really telling. Yeah. So there's a lot to worry about in what we heard. Yeah. But that is not to say that fundamentally there is, there is a strategic issue in the middle of all of this, and there are three factors which have elevated the strategic salience of Greenland. The first is that the ice is melting. And that it's now open to threat from new directions and needs to be defended. Second,
can I just ask you on that? I mean, we can see here quite how close Russia and America are. Yeah. But what has China been doing in this part of the world?
Well, so I mean, the key issue is that ice has melted. Russia and China now have an alliance, so our two biggest security threats have come together. And we're in a heightened state of geopolitical tension. So there's a direct military task which has been neglected by Europe, which we need to address. But then it's also consonant with the wider feature of this competition, which is around rare earths and all of that. I'm more dismissive of that, really. I think Donald Trump's actual intent is a combination of the strategic issues I discussed, but more importantly, this idea that he has a zone of influence that he should control.
Now, we haven't got any detail on what this framework for a deal is. Do you have any confidence that we will get a deal that satisfies a man who literally minutes before said he needs title and ownership over Greenland? It's
hard because I don't think Europe can give that. No. I think that is a step too far. I'm a spy, not a diplomat. I hope there's some clever diplomats on this. I would point to things like Northern Ireland. There are creative diplomatic examples where you can have two versions existing at the same time. But no, I think Mark Rutte has done a skillful job in slowing this down. I don't know how he's done it, but boy, does this conversation need to be slowed down.
And how worried are you that ultimately there is no reversing this fracturing of NATO that we're seeing?
I think it's in play. I think what Rutte has done, as I understand it, let's look at the long term. The long term is that Europe needs to take more responsibility for its own defence. So I think we can expect a flex where which ends with European leadership of NATO and America providing the capabilities to underpin that. That's the ideal solution. I think that's doable. I think the idea is forming, but Europe actually has to bring stuff for the party in order to make that a reality.
Now, another leader who was there, Mark Carney, I thought gave a very impressive speech. And actually some of what he said rather echoed the point that you made a couple of weeks ago, which was this point that if you don't have a zone of influence yourself, you will be in somebody else's. He said, broadly, if you're not at the table through your strength, you're somebody else's lunch, was the way he put it, as it were. What do we need to do? He says we're in this era where rules-based order is fading and it's not coming back. So what should, in a sense, middle-ranking countries like the UK and Canada do to make sure we do have a seat at the table?
Look, I thought it was great, and he talks, as I do, about the fact that this is a structural shift. The old days aren't coming back, and we need to organise to recognise that. There's something about a community of values that really matters, that he was very eloquent about. But can I be super clear? At the end, this is about hard power. We can't have what we want.
And hard power means we have to have more military capability, to come back to what you were saying.
Technology, capability, alliances, all of these things we need to get serious about.
But, I mean, the thing that has been terrifying me, because, and Starmer's actually been talking about this really explicitly, is, he has been saying our nuclear deterrent doesn't function without American cooperation. And you can't replace that anytime soon. So, in the end, our ability to stand up to America is really limited.
Yeah, so let's get on with it. I think we should not hasten a disadvantageous outcome. We get a lot from our alliance with America. We should do everything we can to steward it. But we should recognise we're in a much more transactional world.
So has France handled this better because they're way less dependent on America than we are?
I think everybody. I mean, the Trump central point was America made the modern world and therefore we all owe America. It was a deeply transactional idea, which I reject because of the connectivity and reciprocity that exists. Yes, in 10 years' time, we should aspire to take Ukraine as an example, to have replaced the key enablers upon which we are dependent. Europe is a population of 500 million. It's asking a country of 300 million to defend itself against a country of 140 million. You know, we have got to stand up.
Totally right. So look, let's then get on to this whole issue of you're saying we're living in an era really where it's power that counts. Might is right, whether we like it or not.
Just to correct you, I think that's Donald Trump's view of the world. I don't agree. I think that the connectivity that exists in the world means that's an oversimplification.
Right.
And I think that's what Mark Carney was saying.
No, he was saying that, which is why I was sort of asking you about, you know, given that we are all connected, how we get leverage over somebody like Trump, or indeed China, or indeed Putin, the sort of blue strip there, where they just think it's all about might is right. How do we impose our more humane values on?
I don't have time to do the big vision thing. Can I tell you what I would like for Christmas?
Yep.
20 global-scale technology companies in Europe, including the UK. Totally
We're not getting them by Christmas. I've got to tell you, we might get them in 5 years.
But where does America's edge come from? It comes from its innovation and its tech. So why can't we do that? We've got amazing...
Well, of course we've got to do that. We've got brilliant brains in this
Let's just get on with it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And just, I mean, because I thought I'd just sort of slightly sort of focus on this for a bit, right? Trump says under the Donroe doctrine he can do whatever he likes in this sphere over here, right? China plainly thinks it can do pretty much what it likes over there. Russia, we know what it's up to. Is there any world in which Europe is a proper sphere of influence in that sense?
Well, you know, as Gary Kasparov said the other day, if you're not in a sphere of influence, if you don't have one, you're in one. And I think that the category problem for Europe is not to be in the Russian sphere of influence. And to achieve that, we need to ensure that Russia is seen to have failed in its adventure in Ukraine. If we do that, our confidence changes. I think we get a different sense of what we can do as a continent. I think all sorts of good stuff could flow from that.
And then we're running out of time, but we've got, as you probably know, the British Prime Minister going over to that red blob, going to Beijing, going to China next week. What should he be aiming to? I don't know whether he can get anything from President Xi, but what do you think the point should be of this visit?
I think when I dealt with the Chinese Communist Party, they were super good at doing different things at the same time. We used to be really good at that as well, and we've lost the skill. We should contest them when they really threaten our interests, as they did in the recent spy case. We should recognise that all trade and all economic competition is political for them and organised to effect. And then we should cooperate with them where necessary on things like climate change and what have you. They will find nothing odd about us taking a different approach, depending on those things, because that's what they do to us. No. So we just need to be super pragmatic. Yeah. If I have one criticism of Mark Carney's speech, is it seemed to lend some kind of moral equivalence, you know, to it between America and China. We are very angry with America at the moment, but I would not want to be ruled by the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah, I think there are quite a lot of people watching who would sort of agree with you, Alex. Now, I want to go to the final graphic we've got here, which is all about military spending. One of the things I just want to ask you before we get on to what we spend, and I mean, it is, as a share of GDP, Russia obviously spends the most of the share of GDP, but it's also got an incredibly shrinking economy. So that share is more to do with, I think, the shrinking of its economy than the it is more than the absolute amount. The thing that slightly surprised me, but is China's spending as a share of its national income is relatively low. But I'm assuming that's misleading, given the enormous amount of military hardware we see it launching.
I mean, China's military modernization should be taken seriously, particularly of its military and its nuclear capability. This is real stuff. We don't have time for it now, though. China is more scared of its own people than it's scared of other people. A lot of this is dedicated to internal security. But fundamentally, if that's what the data looks like, I would be careful in assuming...
No, that is what I'm... But nonetheless, you can see that the UK and Germany well below Russia. Do you genuinely believe that we will get to the 5%, that, you know, the new NATO norm, 3.5% or 5%, depending on how you measure it, soon enough? because at the moment, the rate of increase does not seem to be terribly rapid.
And it's very backloaded, and I really worry about that. And the Chief of the Defence Staff sort of said so.
Yeah.
We need to get serious. But the European NATO is 10 times richer than Russia. Russia is, and this is a terrible thing to say, it's actually losing more people from drones now than it is able to recruit. It is all to play for here. I think it is achievable. We just need to prevent Putin from being able to claim victory in Ukraine. That does require not only more money, but a sort of cultural change that we're all in this together.
And a resolve from Trump, surely.
Yes, there's this big issue about the point at which Europe can assume its responsibilities, accepting that America is much further away. Yeah. If America keeps on with the key enablers, intelligence, space, some other stuff, I think the point is coming where we can take that burden.
And just finally, is there any world in which a sensible British government could have blocked the new Chinese embassy?
Look, there was a advisory put out by the Biden administration about the Salt Typhoon suite of cyber capabilities, which meant that China, for a time, could put malware into any telecom system in the world and get onto your phone and my phone. Yep. Yeah, I regret the sort of prestige win that we've conceded to China. I'm not sure we'll get much back in return. It's not a great deal.
But would you have advised the government to block it?
Well, so at the time, I thought the Golden Era was based on a...
Sorry?
I didn't share the premise upon which the Golden Era was based.
Sure.
Right? But they bought it.
Yeah.
The government were in a bind. Yeah. What I'm saying is that the security argument, I don't think, is the decisive issue here. If they want to get onto your phone, they can.
Yep.
That's a much bigger problem that we should be thinking about.
OK, that's very, very interesting. Great to see you as always, Alex. Now, I just want to ask you, so you've heard what Alex had to say, which is that, James, which is that broadly, the China threat is independent, as it were, of, what kind of embassy they have. So, I mean, genuinely, would a Conservative government have stopped this?
We did. I mean, I was the foreign secretary.
Delayed it, you didn't stop
I was the foreign secretary at the time. Look,
well, you didn't stop it because it continued to rumble on. So,
so the point was, and I gave a whole speech on the UK relationship with China, and some of the bits, and we hadn't compared notes when I gave that speech, but one of the points I made is we have to understand where we need to cooperate, where we need to compete, and also where we need to protect ourselves, both sovereign protection and with allies, and running those parallel tracks was absolutely key. Alex is absolutely right. This is a massive PR win for the Chinese, and I am not yet seeing what we've got back, and that's just really bad diplomacy. And I put this on social media. Starmer has handed the Chinese a big PR win, and he's going to go to Beijing in the hope that in an act of gratitude, they'll give something back. That is not how it works. If you want to negotiate, you've got to negotiate from a position of strength. And Starmer's is handing over all these chips at the poker table in the hope that something positive will come back. And I think he's being played just as he was played on every negotiation he's entered into, including Chagos, including with the rail unions, including with the BMA, including with his own backbenchers. He gets played every single time.
Jeremy, do you fancy defending the Prime Minister?
No, not really. But what I would say is take something that Alex said earlier, which I thought was very interesting, that there's an interconnectivity in the world that is absolutely essential. Look at the supply of oil, look at the supply of raw materials, look at the supply of rare earths and everything else. Not one of the four big entities, USA, China, Russia, or the European Union, has any of these things in abundance. The USA possibly more than most. They actually rely very heavily on Africa and Latin America for those supplies. What we're looking at is almost 19th century imperial powers squabbling over bits and pieces from the rest of the world. Surely what we need is an era of cooperation to recognise the environmental and human problems and human inequalities that face this world. So shouldn't we stop looking at the thing from the point of view of potential war and start look at the thing from the potential of a more peaceful future? I'm terrified that none of the governments seem to be putting any effort into rebuilding the UN, any effort into funding the UN or funding overseas aid. They're all into weapons.
So, well, I mean, I'm not sure that is a completely fair account of where, Starmer, Macron, Carney would be. I think, again, in a world where you have an American president who has no respect for the UN, it seems to me, that they are doing, whether it's their best, they're doing something to try and preserve these institutions.
Well,
but you're right, they are massively under threat because of, Putin, Xi, and Trump.
We're seeing the end of international law. We're seeing the end of international order. And we're looking back again to a sort of 19th, early 20th century thing when there was basically a series of big power rivalries where they did deals with each other all the time.
And I suppose
in a sense, what Alex is pointing out is that those deals are what is on the table at the moment.
And finally, I guess, Alex, and I'm not asking you to press all of us, we've got to go to a break in a minute, but do you worry that we will not get back to, in a sense, globally accepted international norms until we've been through another, conceivably, Second World War style mega crisis?
I don't know if it has to go to that, but I think we were naive. I mean, I share all of Jeremy's regrets about the loss of this community of interest. Yeah. But at the same time, we need to recognise that a lot of what we had was because America was the unipolar power and chose to police it and chose to create a zone. That was always going to go away.
And interestingly, Carney says that, Carney, one of the most interesting things which we might have debated another time is that, Carney claims that was always a con.
Yeah, basically. But the optimistic take here is that this is the moment where we grow up and recognise our responsibilities and use this interconnectivity that Jeremy describes to create something along those lines.
Well, that feels to me like a potentially positive moment at which to go to a quick break. Don't go away, because there's much more on this and our energy future with the Energy Secretary, Ed Miliband. So don't go away. See you in a minute.
Well, welcome to the break. We've got a bit of a quiz for you, a bit of a light-hearted quiz for you. We are never, ever going to get back together. I think we could probably sing that, couldn't we? I'm going to ask you to pick, each of you, you've only got a minute, which of these couples you think are going to most likely get back together? Donald Trump and Mark Carney. Jeremy might have an insight on this one. Zara Sultana and Jeremy Corbyn. Brooklyn Beckham and his family. Robert Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch. Colleen Rooney and Rebecca Vardy. Or Michael O'Leary and Elon Musk. James, who do you think is going to get back together?
Musk and O'Leary.
Musk and O'Leary?
I think that'll be the first one.
He's going to buy Ryanair. Jeremy, what do you think? Who's going to get back together?
The Beckhams, they'll get back together because the story's got to go on, the publicity's got to go on, Vogue's got to go on. They'll be back
What
together.
about you and Zara?
Listen, we can talk anytime. It's not a problem.
Anyone else, James? 20 seconds. Tell us. Robert Jenrick gone for good? Or will he have another stint at the Tory leadership and in 5 years' time?
Oh, no, he's not a Conservative anymore.
Not a Conservative anymore. He's gone for good. All right, thanks both very much.
Welcome back. In just a minute, I'll be chatting with the Energy Secretary, Ed Miliband. But first, Pippa.
Yes, now, back in July, both of you were sitting on the exact sofa when Jeremy confirmed he was forming a new left-wing party. With the collapse of the two-party system, it looked like there could be an opportunity on both flanks. Now, back then, polling from YouGov showed that almost 1 in 5 people, 18%, said they'd consider voting for your party. But just before their party conference in December, late November, I think it was, this had slipped 6 points to just 12%. Not great for their hopes of winning seats. And only 4% of their voters would back them exclusively, with 85% saying they'd be willing to support the Greens. So is your party splitting the vote on the left? It's been a tough few months for the Conservatives as well, despite Kemi Badenoch's effort to turn things round. When More in Common asked which party best represents the right of British politics, a bigger bloc said Reform UK than the Tories. But maybe there's some hope for James and his colleagues. The largest portion of all, 36%, said that they didn't know. Robert.
Yes, there are a ton of stuff I want to pick up with both Jeremy and James. So, Jeremy, actually, I don't know if you remember, but I think the last time we were on the show, you gave us a sort of world exclusive because you revealed, I think literally the day before it all came out, that you were setting up this great party. But you've had a bit of aggro since then in its formation. Do you slightly regret this new venture?
No, not at all. It's been a bumpy ride, that's for sure. But we have just shy of 60,000 people signed up as paid members of the party. There's an election going on now for the committee of the new party, which will be resolved next month. And from that point on, it's a pucker political party in operation. So I've been to an awful lot of very interesting community discussions all over the country where people from different backgrounds, some ex-Labour, some ex-other things, some ex-nothing, just come together and talked about issues that face them in their community, their sense of dislocation, their sense of anger at inequality, poverty and injustice in our society. Those are people that really do intend to do something politically, and I've been fascinated by the meetings I've had.
But what's the sort of fundamental difference between you and the Greens, who are doing incredibly well in the polls? I mean, wouldn't it have just been more sensible for you to throw in your lot with them?
Well, the Greens do not claim to be or pretend to be a socialist party. They have many socialists in it, and they have obviously very strong environmental politics, and there are many people that are in the Greens that would be working with us, and many in our party who'd also want to work with the Greens.
Just tell me something that you disagree fundamental. So with Zach Polanski, what do you disagree with Zach Polanski over?
I get on fine on a personal level with Zach Polanski, and I think that what he's doing is very effective in promoting alternative politics and turning debate around. And at a local level, every one of your party groups actually are working with people with the Greens. So I wouldn't look upon this as a massive fight between your party and the Greens. I think at local level there's going to be a lot of cooperation. But our pitch is much more that we want politics to be based in the community, campaigning on health, on housing and all those issues, not just an electoral machine.
Now, Robert Jenrick stood up in the House of Commons today during Prime Minister's questions, and I think many people would say asked a perfectly good question, performed quite well. I mean, many of your colleagues have said to me, good riddance to Robert Jenrick, but he is a loss to you, isn't he?
It would be ridiculous to pretend that a defection of someone senior and experienced from the Conservative Party was not bad news. And Kemi hasn't, and I don't think there are very many of us that would just dismiss it. I think that said, this whole process has shown publicly something about Kemi that a lot of us that have worked with her for a while have known, is that she's got real backbone, and she acted very, very decisively. And I think that the big takeaway from these events is that she has come out positively from it. I think Rob hasn't enhanced his reputation. He might have even damaged his reputation somewhat. But look, we would prefer that he hadn't gone, but he has gone, and we'll deal with it. And Nick Timothy stepped into the role, and we are now in a position where we have got clarity. The rumours about Rob have been frustrating for a long time. We now know where we stand. He's gone, and we've got work to do, and we're getting on with that work, and we're not going to be distracted by psychodrama, I think is the word of the day.
Now, I think most people would agree that Kemi Badenoch's performance in the House of Commons has improved almost beyond recognition. But I am slightly reminded, because I'm old enough to remember this, that Haig, during the first Blair government, was a brilliant performer in the House of Commons and then got totally humiliated at the next election. So how do you move from better Commons performance to significantly better performance in the country? Because Reform are still significantly out in front.
Well, Reform's poll position
It's slipping a bit.
is slipping.
Yeah, it's slipping a bit.
And Kemi's and the Conservatives' position is improving. It's not instant, and anything meaningful doesn't happen instantly. So we've got work to do. We continue to do that work. The big difference between us and Reform is that we are going to ensure that we've got a genuine plan for government in the national interest, economically sensible, deliverable, on a foundation of good security, both domestically and internationally. And the big difference between us and Reform is that they're just plucking popular issues left, right, and centre. There's no coherence to what they're putting forward.
Pippa, I just want to sort of talk to you. I mean, when you talk to Labour MPs, do you think that the way that essentially Trump has drowned out everything else over the last few days is sort of good or bad for Labour? Because we are also, again, seeing from Labour, I mean, just a raft of additional U-turns, which, you know, what's the view?
Well, I think the fact that we spent most of the beginning of this programme talking about international affairs shows why the government has had to be focused on everything that's going on internationally. But there's a great frustration, not just, it must be said, in the ranks of the Labour Party, but also in Downing Street and government, that so much of the Prime Minister's energy at the beginning of this year has had to be focused on Donald Trump. When they started this year, desperate to make the cost of living their policy priority. I think Keir Starmer said that any moment, any second spent talking about anything other than the cost of living was a wasted moment. And yet here we are. Not only have their announcements on cost of living barely cut through, they've also made a variety of rollbacks and U-turns and delays, things like the Hillsborough law. We don't know yet what's happening with pub rates, hospitality rates. We don't know what's happening with jury trial. There's some suggestion that they won't go ahead with that as planned. So I think the sooner they get back onto the domestic agenda as far as Labour MPs are concerned, the better, particularly because we've got the May elections coming up and they're being squeezed on the right by Reform, on the left by other progressive parties, and MPs desperately want to get back onto the bread and butter issues that voters care about.
James Jeremy, I'm going to come back to you and indeed Pippa in just a minute or two. Now, a little earlier, I spoke to the Energy Secretary Ed Miliband. I wonder if I talked to him about cost of living. I bet you I didn't. I began, in fact, by asking him how he felt at being attacked today by Donald Trump for allegedly wasting all the remaining oil and gas in the North Sea.
Obviously, I did hear some of the speech, Robert. Obviously, I disagree with him on this. As a long-standing area of difference that we've had with President Trump. Look, fundamentally, his point is the answer for Britain is fossil fuels. But we know fossil fuels won't give us energy security. And you don't need to take my word for it. We saw what happened when Russia invaded Ukraine and prices went through the roof because of our dependence on fossil fuels. The only way to bring down bills for good for Britain, and the position is different for the US, the way to bring down bills for good is with homegrown, clean power that we control, which is why our incredibly successful offshore wind auction last week, enough to power 12 million homes, is so important for our energy security.
Well, on that, he also said only stupid people buy what he calls windmills, and that is wind turbines. How stupid are you?
Look, I think one of the lessons I learned from the Prime Minister's approach on this is the point with the President is he has his own style. We're not going to sort of, you know, trade views on this. I'm not sure he's that interested in my views anyway. But look, I think fundamentally when you look across the world, you see actually the growth of offshore wind in many places. I mean, this was very clear to me at COP30, where I was in Brazil in November, for energy security as well as climate reasons. People see the importance of homegrown clean energy they control rather than fossil fuel markets controlled by petrostates and dictators where the price can fluctuate and you're on the roller coaster.
I mean, in respect of your great clean power plan that you've announced today, part of it is to make sure that a big proportion of the manufacturing relating to it, particularly these heat pumps, which are a more efficient way of heating people's homes, something like 70%, I think, is your target for them to be made in Britain. But what do you mean, though, by made in Britain? Because, of course, many of the parts of these heat pumps will be made abroad. How are you going to police it?
Well, it's about the manufacture. The key point about this, and I think this is, again, a global trend, is that we see huge advantage for homegrown clean power when it comes to energy security, when it comes to lower bills, but also crucially when it comes to jobs. Part of our offshore wind auction that we announced last week was thousands of jobs that are going to be created, including in supply chains. And we want to do the same when it comes to heat pumps. We are a leading European manufacturer of boilers. We also have huge opportunity in relation to heat pumps. Only about 40% of the heat pumps that are actually used in Britain are currently manufactured in Britain. We want that number to go up. And we're going to have an active industrial policy, including supporting the companies to start manufacturing those heat pumps here in Britain.
And don't go away. After the break, I talked to Ed Miliband about relations with the EU and Trump's controversial border peace plan for Gaza. Don't go away.
Well, welcome to the break now. As Trump makes ever bolder threats on the world stage, Europe's been scrabbling around to try and find ways of reining him in. So we've written some options up for you to which levers of power you think would most influence Trump and which you would deploy. So I'm going to kick off with this one, boycotting the US Games at the FIFA World Cup. Jeremy, would you support that as a way of reining in Trump?
I think that would be a very good message because Donald Trump doesn't know much about football and it's a newfound interest for him. So it might be very embarrassing for him. That would be a good thing to do.
Do you think England and Scotland should boycott it? Should they not go?
Oh, listen, I think move the World Cup to Canada and Mexico and leave the USA out.
Oh, right. Or Venezuela, perhaps.
Yeah.
Or Greenland. A bit icy up
Well,
there, isn't it?
if it's warm enough, do it in Greenland as well. But Mexico and Canada can handle it just fine.
And James, King Charles cancels his US state visit in April.
So I'm not sure that always reaching for punitive measures is the right bit.
But if you had to choose one of these, Starmer performing, there's a Love Actually speech, Hugh Grant's Love Actually speech, you could perform that. No more Trump-owned golf courses.
No, I
open.
think.
Go on, pick one.
I think. Remember the sun and the north wind, that fable. You get more done by winning people over than trying to push them away.
Oh, well, very diplomatic. Any others of these, Jeremy, that you'd pick?
I always thought that we'd get Guantanamo Bay closed down because Donald Trump would see it as an ideal spot for a resort and a golf course.
Well, if he thought that for Gaza, he may well have done. Robert, what do you reckon? Which of those would you deploy?
Well, I mean, everybody tells me who knows about these things, and actually I talked about this on the podcast the other day, is that actually you shouldn't withdraw Charles, because he is, or the king, or however I'm supposed to refer to him, because he is literally the one person Trump listens to.
There we go.
Send him over and get him to change his mind on various.
There we go. Robert's suggestion too. Thanks very much.
Welcome back. Now, in the second part of my interview with Ed Miliband, I put to him what the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney said yesterday, which was that middle-ranking countries like Britain and Canada had to form deep alliances with each other or they would end up as Donald Trump's lunch. So why isn't Starmer doing more of this?
Well, I think we are. I think the Carney speech was a really...
Where are these deep alliances with the likes of Carney, for example, or the EU, for that matter?
Well, look, I mean, I'll give you a very good example. When Donald Trump pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement, people said it's going to have a domino effect around the world. At the COP30 summit in Brazil in November, 190 plus countries once again recommitted to the Paris Agreement, recommitted to 1.5 degrees. About 80 countries said they wanted to see a roadmap on the transition away from fossil fuels, global north, global south. These are the multilateral alliances that Mark Carney is talking about in his speech. And you know what? There's something really interesting here, Robert, which is that, President Trump has his own positions on these questions. What I hear from lots of countries around the world is they see they want to fight for multilateralism. They recognise we can only tackle global problems by working together.
And so, on that, will you be urging the Prime Minister to go faster and deeper in terms of trade alliances with the European Union?
Well, that's what the Prime Minister wants to do. And look, energy is
But is he going fast enough or deep enough? Many would say not.
I think he is driving forward with this. Look, what we are doing in energy is working out with the European Union how we can be part of the electricity market, because there are gains to consumers, gains in terms of jobs for us doing so. So that is proceeding. And obviously our alliance with the European Union is incredibly important. And, recent events only serve to demonstrate that.
And therefore, on that, in what sense is our relationship with America special at all, in a positive sense, when you've got a president who accuses the Prime Minister of, this is Trump's words, great stupidity, was what he publicly accused the Prime Minister of in giving up ownership of Chagos. This is abusive language.
Look, President Trump has his own style, and obviously I'm saying that diplomatically, but I think the approach the Prime Minister has taken, and I think this has been the right approach over the last year, is not to engage in commentary on President Trump's commentary, because he didn't think that would be productive for Britain, but instead to engage in the hard yards of diplomacy, to seek to find common ground, and where there is disagreement, to call it out. And
hang on. Where has he explicitly called out Donald Trump? Explicitly?
Well, on Greenland. I mean, look, he could not have been clearer, Robert, on Greenland, which is that the sovereignty of Greenland is a matter for the people of Greenland and the people of Denmark. And as he said in the House of Commons today, he will not yield on our values and what we stand for in relation to that issue.
Donald Trump wants the Prime Minister to join his board of peace and sit on a board of peace with the Russian and Belarusian dictators, Lukashenko, Putin. Should the Prime Minister join that board of peace?
Well, look, we've obviously received the invitation on this. We're very concerned about the potential presence of President Putin on that board of peace. And so obviously we're going to be discussing with our American allies how we go about addressing some of these issues. So again, I think this is where the diplomacy, and this is what the Foreign Secretary I've discussed this with is engaged in. That's where the diplomacy and the work with the allies is important. The most important thing for us in relation to Gaza is that the ceasefire holds, that we begin reconstruction of Gaza, and that we work towards the two-state solution that we all want to see. That's what's in our interests, and we are engaging with our American counterparts on the right way forward.
Ed Miliband, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, if you enjoyed that Ed Miliband interview as much as everybody here palpably did, believe it or not, there's a longer version on the Peston Show YouTube channel. But I want to pick up one aspect of what he said, which is whether the Prime Minister should accept Donald Trump's invitation to join the Board of Peace for Gaza, given that Trump has confirmed tonight that Vladimir Putin will be on that board. Should Keir Starmer sit on a board of peace, James, with Vladimir Putin?
Vladimir Putin is a bad faith actor. I mean, he is to peace as vinegar is to milk. I do not believe for an instant that Vladimir Putin will act in good faith, will act to try and bring peace to Gaza or to Israel, Jeremy, or to the wider region.
Should our Prime Minister sit on a board with Vladimir Putin, with whom we are effectively at war?
No, he should not be on the board, and the board should not be there either. The people of Palestine deserve better than this gang of rogues getting together to once again reoccupy Gaza. What has happened to our belief that genocide should not be rewarded and that Palestinian people should be allowed to live in peace, not under occupation?
What is the point, from your point of view, James, in this board, if it is going to You know, I mean, it's quite hard to disagree with your description of Putin. So what is the point of this board if he's going to be on it?
Well, look, I think we need to be realistic about the reasons why the conflict has happened, the reason why Israel initiated military action into Gaza.
There's a slightly separate issue, that.
Yeah, but the point I'm saying is, I am unconvinced that with Putin and one of his allies on that board of peace, it will be anything other than an opportunity for him to gain international leverage. I don't think it'll be good for the Israelis. I don't think it'll be good for the Palestinian people. I don't think it'll be good for the wider region. And I don't think it can carry credibility.
And you don't think the board should exist, but you sort of agree with James on that, don't you?
James makes a valid point there, but if we don't think these people should be on the board, then why are we having the board at all?
So annoyingly, I'm told we're out of time. That's it. I leave you with one piece of advice. In Davos today, Donald Trump confused Iceland with Greenland. So if you see Navy SEALs next to the frozen chips cabinet tomorrow, try not to freak out. Goodbye.